health, parenting, finance, travel, and home improvement. This is the Suburban Folk Podcast.
Welcome to the Suburban Folk Podcast. I'm Greg Rodersheimer, your host. Today, we're going to focus in on parenting. Specifically, we've brought a guest back to the show, Drew Vernon. He is the marketing director for the toy company Tonies. And Tonies is an imagination-building, screen-free digital listening experience that plays stories, songs, and more. He was in the show back in January, and after we spoke, I clearly was having trouble figuring out how the creative Tonies in particular work. As Drew was walking me through that, he was nice enough to let me get a Toniebox and introduce it to my children. And let me say that from that time around January, they've had a ball, especially with those creative Tonies where they can record themselves and play it on the Toniebox, as well as what we mentioned in that episode, a lot of familiar characters from Disney, all the familiar faces that you would think of, to more traditional stories. Actually, Pinocchio, although believe it or not, Pinocchio was a character before Disney, as well as other things. And I know there's been a lot of expansion since then. So I'm really excited, Drew, that you were able to join me back on the show. Do you want to go ahead and give us an update since that time at the beginning of the year? I know it's probably been very busy for you from what I've seen.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me back on the show, Greg. It's great to see you again. I really enjoyed our conversation last time. So it's awesome to reconnect. You're right. It's been really busy for us this year. This is our first full year in the U.S. market. So we have been really just trying to tell more parents and teachers about the Toniebox and everything that it offers. Meanwhile, we've been launching more and more characters, as you mentioned, with a lot of really well-known licenses. So we came out with Peppa Pig. We're coming out with Sesame Street this month, Elmo, Cookie Monster, Paw Patrol is coming, Mickey and Minnie are coming, Moana is coming, Frozen 2. So there's no shortage of new releases. But we've also had some partnership announcements, which we can get into a little bit more that I'm also very excited about.
Let's go ahead and recap just even the Toniebox and the Tonies that go along with it. Again, I mentioned the creative Tony mainly because I was clearly struggling myself with the description and understanding how much you could do with those creative Tonies. And I think, for example, you were really emphasizing that that's where a lot of the magic happens, because you can literally have your kids record themselves, or, for example, have their grandparents record themselves, and then they can save that on the Creative Tony and then put that onto the Toniebox to play. And then going back to the licensed characters with the preloaded, if that's the right way to describe, stories and songs that go along with them. And then also talk a little bit more as well about how the Toniebox works specifically for that age range of 3 to 5. For example, it's not a tablet that's going to immediately break because it's a young toddler that breaks everything else that they get their hands on.
Sure. So I apologize. I should back up. A Toniebox is really a creation of a couple of dads in Germany a few years back. They met on the board of a preschool together, and they really wanted to update kind of the CD player technology and create something that was figure-based and something that young children as young as 3 could operate on their own without adult supervision. So that's where the Toniebox kind of was born. You put the Tonies on the box. They're magnetic. They have RFID chip inside. It will actually download the content onto the box itself. Once it does that, it becomes a completely disconnectable experience. So you can take it in the car. You can take it to a friend's house. But that's the basic premise. It's a storyteller for kids, a song player for kids, and importantly, it's screen free. So they don't have to stare at a screen while they listen to the content. As you mentioned, it's got 2 types of Tonies. One is the content Tony that comes preloaded with songs and stories from all of your favorite characters, Disney, storybook favorites, Peppa Pig and such. And then you mentioned the creative Tonies, which is kind of the other side of it, the blank canvas, so to speak, where a child can write their own songs, their own stories, and they can record up to 90 minutes of their own content and play it back whenever they like. And I think you mentioned as well, grandparents and parents really love that too, because they can read a favorite bedtime story. They can upload it from their phone onto the figure in a matter of seconds. And, the next time the child puts it on the box, they're going to be hearing a message or story from a loved one.
Something else that I noticed as a feature with the Creative Tonies, at least the last time I logged into this part of the app, there are also additional stories that are read from, I'm assuming, authors, other sources that you can also upload onto the Creative Tony as it continues to come out. So in other words, it's almost like your own downloadable library above and beyond even what you're recording through your phone.
Yeah, exactly. So you can put any type of audio content on to a Creative Tony, your own MP3 files, WAV files, or you can also download our original and licensed digital content. You can put those onto the Creative Tonies as well.
Yeah, so I thought that was a really cool extra that, you can continue to put the different things on there and not even necessarily just if you're not being creative, let's say you can't figure out what you want to record on your own. There are ever changing stories and songs that can also be put on it as well. So you mentioned some of the happenings that are going on as far as, well, I would assume from a marketing standpoint, making sure that people continue to know the brand and what all is going on. I will say that I guess it wasn't long after we first chatted that there was a special episode of Ellen where Tonies were featured. And I know that was the beginning of the year. Talk about basically where you've gone from there and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was great. We were a part of Ellen's kind of 12 days of Christmas or 12 days of giveaways. And, we were able to get onto The View. Whoopi loved us on The View. So we've kind of been getting the story out in a very similar way in terms of our messaging. I mentioned the partnerships earlier. We've had a couple of key kind of partnerships that we've come out with this year, the first of which was with Go Noodle, which is really well known in the elementary school system for providing action-oriented content and mindfulness content. And we actually partnered with them on a mindfulness Tony, where we're able to take their great content and take it off of the screen and allow, parents and teachers to provide, a resetting activity for children to focus on, being present and being mindful. So that was a really great partnership. More recently, we just partnered with Levar Burton, who was kind of a childhood hero of mine from his work on PBS as the host of Reading Rainbow. And so as I was kind of thinking about people who represented the same core values as Tony's, it made sense for us to approach him. And fortunately, he left the product and he agreed to come on as our brand ambassador. And we've actually just recently launched a Tony of him reading his book called The Rhino Who Swallowed a Storm.
I'm glad that you confirmed for me that Levar Burton is from Reading Rainbow fame, because I was 99% sure that was the case, but had just enough doubt that I wanted you to confirm that for me. So yeah, that's exactly what I recall his background being. I don't know if I'm familiar with his children's book. I'll have to go check it out. Is it something that was featured on Reading Rainbow way back when?
The story behind the book is actually really interesting. And it was amazing to kind of hear him recount this in person. But he was personal friends with Mr. Rogers, going back to, both of their work on PBS. And there was a specific event that happened, I think back in 2012 or 2013. It was like a school shooting or something that was really weighing heavy on Levar, and just dealing with it. And, he was thinking to himself, if Mr. Rogers were here, he would know exactly what to say, to tell, the children of America how to cope and how to deal. And he thought, Mr. Rogers, unfortunately has passed. I'm going to give it a shot. So the book is actually about teaching social and emotional well-being, and developing skills around difficult circumstances. And so it's actually a really touching read, and we're really, glad to have it on to the Tony. We've also developed some additional original content with him to further explore social and emotional development for children.
Very cool. Is the original content, again, I'm using our last chat as my bookmark, I guess, so to speak. Was that something that was already being developed at the beginning of this year, or is that somewhat new with his partnership?
So we announced the partnership back in July. So this would have been after we had spoken. And then we put together the additional content. So we have a really great kind of in-house production team, content wise. And so they put that together and recorded with him. And we actually just launched it this month.
We're saying, like, let's say, for example, if there's songs that you can download through the app, are these songs that were people that are hired by Tonies that they write them and then record them? Or let's say, are they already out there somewhere and then you bring them in-house, so to speak, to be included in a certain Tony?
Yeah, so it really kind of varies Tony by Tony. Sometimes with our licensed partnerships, we'll get existing content and we'll just put it onto a Tony. That's kind of the easiest way to launch a Tony, is just to use the existing content. Sometimes it's a kind of a co-creation. So with Sesame Street, for example, we worked with Sesame Street with the voice talent for Elmo and Cookie Monster, and we created our own content that is kind of never before heard on the TV show or elsewhere. It's completely original to Tony's, but using the actual voice talent for the characters.
And then, of course, I guess the question I have to ask as you go through the different TV shows that it's been featured on, as well as the partnerships and so on, do you get to talk to all of these folks that ultimately come on? That sounds like that would be a pretty cool part of the job.
Yeah, sometimes. I was pretty heavily involved with the Levar production. For some of the other ones, not so much myself. I'm more on the marketing side and the education side, but we have a really great content team that interfaces more closely with the voice talent.
Heck, can you give us any previews beyond the ones you've already mentioned? I think I heard you say Moana's on the way. You said Peppa Pig, which you're speaking my daughter's language right there with that one. So I might have to earmark that for a Christmas gift. But any other collaborations that are coming? Yeah,
for sure. So we have Moana, as I mentioned, a few other Disney characters. I believe we've got Buzz Lightyear coming, Beauty and the Beast. We're also launching a collaboration with National Geographic. So that's getting into nonfiction content, which is really great, especially for older kids as well. And then we've got Paw Patrol as well, which I think I might have mentioned. So those are just a few of the ones to come later this year.
Jumping back into some of the additional uses, or I guess even using myself as a testimonial for the way that we've used the product, I don't know that we got into travel that much the last time we chatted, but something that I would say has been nice for us is actually easily being able to collect the Toniebox as well as the Tonies that we have. Cuts down on screen time because, hey, when you're in a car, you do whatever you can to keep your kids occupied until you get to where you're trying to go. But we found that to be a really nice alternative for travel. Any other areas that maybe people wouldn't necessarily think of for these stories? Again, even not necessarily just to cut down screen time, but where other products may not be as convenient, let's say, to use in a certain setting.
I think travel is a really great example. This can go in the car, this can go on an airplane. There's a standard headphone jack, so they can listen through, either their own headphones or the Tonies headphones. So that's a great one. We're finding a lot of success in classrooms as well. So we have kind of a separate initiative from our main one, which is called Tonies for Teachers, which is showing teachers how to use the Toniebox in their classroom. And that can be for both content Tonies, playing stories, as well as the creative Tonies. A lot of teachers are recording their own kind of messages. Like if you want to do like a cleanup song or something like that, or your own kind of action songs, you can record that as a teacher onto a creative Tony, and it actually becomes a tool to use in the classroom, because instead of repeating yourself over and over and over again on common instructions, you can record it once on a creative Tony and then just direct a child to use the Toniebox to guide them through their next activity for the day.
I actually just got done with my son's soccer practice, and I probably could have used something that didn't require me to repeat myself over and over again. Probably not the best use being in the middle of a soccer field, but I can certainly see it for the teachers. I know we talked about this in January, and Gosh, I guess we're almost in the same boat now in September than we were then, as far as some of the potential virtual. I mean, more people are in classrooms, which is great. But there are definitely stories already coming out of schools that are having more quarantines and, potential for hybrid and or virtual. How has that looked from your perspective through the beginning of the year to now?
Yeah, it's a huge topic for me. More I talk to teachers, and I've been to a few conferences, showing Tonies to teachers, and based on my conversations with them, it's really touchy right now because on the one hand, you have a very serious, situation with the pandemic and the, Delta variant, and we want to keep our kids safe. But on the other hand, I'm coming more and more to believe that, virtual learning has some serious drawbacks in the social, emotional, and even intellectual development of children. So, I think, not to get too far on a tangent, that's a concern for me. I think, as I put it in a Toniebox setting, is if we can offer one more tool to a parent or one more tool to a teacher to facilitate instruction and learning without a screen, then I'm all for that. So, a teacher could, use Tonies even remotely, where they're putting, daily instructions onto the figure. And then the child, instead of having to go through mom and dad and their emails from the teacher, they can actually just put a Creative Tonie on their Toniebox from home and get the daily message from their teacher back at school. So there are a lot of applications where we can use Tonies to facilitate learning remotely.
Yeah, I think you're spot on as far as being very clear. I would challenge anybody that thought virtual school was going to replace, that's probably not even the right way to say, because I don't think anybody would say that for the classroom setting. Certainly, there are challenges that I don't think anybody overcame from being out of the classroom completely. But from the standpoint of having whatever tools are available to make things as easy and effective, I guess would be the right word, as it can be as we continue to bounce back and forth. I would assume, to say the very least, that probably gives you some meaning and a mission in that realm of the school world.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll be able to kind of overcome the pandemic. In the meantime, we've got to make do and do the best we can for our kids.
I can't help but talk about screen time in general and Tonies. And we talked a lot about that, of course, with my introduction to the product. I'm curious, is there anything from a data collection standpoint that shows as the product continues to be adopted, especially in the US, even numbers, let's say, of reductions in screen time or just, I guess, testimonials from people that have purchased the product for their kids and what that's done to, again, remove them away from the detrimental issues that can come with too much screen time?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's one that I think about a lot. It's really tough to gather data. Qualitatively, we hear all the time from parents that, they love their Toniebox. It takes their kids off the screens. I saw recently, I think, with the pandemic, like kids are using screens for 6 to 10 hours a day. And I thought, gosh, that's terrible. Like, pre-pandemic, the recommendation was to have no more than an hour of screen time a day for kids over 2. And, as a parent, I generally adhered to that. But then when COVID came, our schedules got disrupted and we were putting our kids more and more on screens, both for remote learning, which we talked about, but also just to kind of keep them occupied. And I think, the more and more we do that, the worse and worse it gets in terms of, giving our children a passive experience where they're staring at these blue lights turning into, zombies. And that's, my terminology, not the technical terminology, but, I notice a difference in my kids when they've been staring at a screen too long. It affects their behavior. I would prefer to give them a screen-free experience. Again, the content side is still a passive experience, but it puts the creative burden on you as the listener to visualize the story that you're hearing. So it's training your muscle in a way that a TV screen doesn't. On the other side, you've got the creative Tonies that's more of a blank canvas where you actually have to do the active work of being a creator and not a consumer. So I just love both sides of that proposition that take you away from that screen and give you an alternate for engaging your kids in a way that, won't turn them into zombies.
Let's talk a little bit about the distribution side. I want to say at the beginning of the year, and I know they're available at Target, I believe Amazon. Keep me honest if that's incorrect. But how's that growth been as far as just accessibility to the product for consumers?
Yeah, I'd say that's growing. So when we last spoke, we had our direct-to-consumer website, Tonies.com, Amazon. We are sold there. This year, it's really about expanding into brick-and-mortar retail. So in addition to being on Target.com, we'll be in, your local Target store. This fall, we're getting into Best Buy, into some regional retailers as well. So we're becoming more and more available, and we're doing that with the intent of just reaching more parents and getting in front of more kids. Again,
I'll go back to my intro of if people have my experience, there is definitely something to be said to touch and feel the Toniebox itself, to you have it completely sink in about what we're talking about as far as the product and how it works. So I think that'll be a really, really good thing and really nice thing to see. Plus, heck, I saw some of the displays again on Ellen and the View and those areas, and they look really nice. And I said, hey, I know what that is. So again, I think they'll make a nice end cap in Target and anywhere else that they're available.
Yeah, that's the goal.
So we've talked about, I think, the near-term plans as far as the partnerships and obviously the continuing expanding content. Can I prod you for long-term? Like, what's the 5-year plan or anything like that? Is there kind of expansion of technology that you see? Is there expansion of the types of products?
Yeah, I can't talk in too many specifics, but I'll just share a little bit of my vision. Is, I may have mentioned last time, prior to coming to Tonies, I was with Lego. Somewhere along the line of being a marketer, I really kind of shifted my thinking because I saw the impact that a good toy has on a child. I also started my own daycare. I saw a lot of kids coming in from different backgrounds, and I really started to think myself more of a child development advocate. And so with that kind of lens in mind, I'm really looking for new and different ways to engage with children, to teach them, and to just empower them with the tools that they need to be creative, to be proactive, and to turn into functioning, contributing, adults and happy adults. So that leads me to, want to explore ways to do that with adding different, functionality to a Toniebox to make it more interactive, to continue to partner with the best license partners to bring the best stories, just really to focus on creating, that imaginative world for the child.
All right, I'm going to go way off topic because that's right. I think I might have forgotten about the Daycare Experience. Can you talk about that even a little bit? Again, just completely separate from the world of toys for a minute. What are you seeing, and I guess even with your own family, as far as shifts that have had to happen for that young age? Again, essentially what your target market is, I think, for that 3, 4, 5-year-old age, and dare I say, hard to get workers to continue to come in. I mean, it's in all industries, right? But it's definitely been in childcare as well. So as somebody that's been in that world, what do you see for even what has been understood as basic daycare, childcare? And do you think that's going to shift or continue to shift, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex issue because there's so many moving parts. And, my daycare experience was kind of pre-pandemic. So I don't have direct firsthand experience, but I think a lot of it is just based in like uncertainty. My daughter's preschool closed down for 2 months last year. And, that leads you to have to find other ways to find daycare. I do know that a lot of our working arrangements are more flexible now. Some of that's changed, but I think it's going to have a continuing impact on the education world probably for years to come.
I think that's probably a pretty safe bet. And again, I'm just expanding that to the world of any way to help educators childcare workers and so on. And I guess even your neighbors when you consider, I haven't heard as much about the learning pods and stuff this year since the public schools and so on have been able to open a little bit more than they have. But just across the board in the community, I think there will be continued shifts, and any way that you can help your neighbor in your community will be more than appreciated. I could say as a parent of kids at that particular age. Well, Drew, before I let you go, here's a burning question. Of all the content that has been created so far, do you have a particular favorite, or again, any of these things that are coming forward that you're the most excited about?
Absolutely. The Levar Burton project was, kind of a passion project for me. So I'm a little biased towards that. But I think, we have so many great Tonies. Another favorite of mine is the Cars Tony. And that actually ties back to a personal story as well. So when I was in college, I was actually a tour guide and in Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. And one of my stops on my tours was the town that Radiator Springs from the movie Cars was based on. So for that reason, I'm a fan of the Cars Tony.
Cool. Well, like I said, we have our eye on the Peppa Pig Tony because my daughter watches, well, frankly, way more than she probably should for Peppa Pig. But I guess there's worse things out there for her to get into. So I think she'll be pretty excited that that's out there and available. One other thing I want to mention too, again, I don't think we highlighted the first time around, is the characters themselves are also fun just to display. I mean, again, where we have it is on her bookshelf with all of the Tonys in front there. And, she's been known to even just take those and play with them as action figures, in and of themselves before she actually puts them on to play the stories and or the song. So sort of a dual purpose there as well for other type of creative play, not just the speakers themselves. So, well, Drew, I really appreciate you coming back on. And again, I have been following, even before we got a chance to chat, all of the things that you have on LinkedIn and otherwise. So it sounds like everything is going really, really well. I'm excited to see, especially when we get towards the holidays this year, just continued expansion. And of course, best of luck as you continue to push forward. Before I let you go, do you want to go ahead and give folks information as far as the best place to find Tonies or any kind of contact information if they do have questions?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, we're, going to be available in Best Buy, Target this fall, in addition to Amazon, Tonies.com. We do have a promotion code for podcast listeners. If you go to Tonies.com and put in Tony Podcast in the checkout, you'll get 15% off a purchase of a Tony box. So your listeners can use that if they'd like. If you have questions, we have a great kind of customer happiness team that can field your questions. Their inbox is hello@tonys.com, or you can actually call them to 877-MY-TONY.
Very cool. And of course, I'll put all of the information into the show notes, especially that discount code, so people can take advantage of that. Again, Drew, I appreciate you coming back on the show, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Greg.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or all other major podcasting applications to be notified of our latest episode. You can also join our conversation at suburbanfolk.com or any social media site, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the handle Suburban Folk.
Thank you for listening to my daddy.